Hello, everyone. So I hope everyone had a great Christmas. I just want to start with that. I have left quite a few comments I need to respond to as well. I'm not ignoring anyone at all. I fully intend to respond to them all. I just had I got kind of busy and caught up with Christmas with my family. I've got a large family, so yeah, it was like crazy, and I didn't get a chance to do anything. So I'm really, really sorry, and I definitely will respond to everyone. I'm going to continue with part three. I'm probably going to try and push a little harder to get further on because this is kind of taking a long time. And I feel like, I'm probably hitting like 11 pages per segment, but there's technically 4 pages of transcript per page. So it's 40 pages, but also like when there's 184 pages, um, which each page has 4 pages of transcript on, is a lot to get through. So I want to try and get through it at a faster pace. So yeah, I'm going to aim for kind of a double the amount of pages that I've been doing. So if I get to around page 40, 44, I will be happy. I also intend to do tomorrow, I intend to do Candace Owens' motion to dismiss against the Macron's lawsuit. So for anyone who's kind of following that, I will be doing that. I said I was going to do it on Saturday last week, but again, things are just so wild and hectic at the moment. I did not have time at all. So let's continue with this deposition. And again, just to reiterate, there will be some boring points at the moment. Library's lawyers are kind of laying the foundations for the witnesses' qualifications, experience, etc., because that's she has to call into question this witness's experience and knowledge, which I will say has not impressed me so far. She sounds like she's fairly newly qualified. She has never done any kind of litigation, kind of as an expert witness. She's only recently obtained her master's degree. Her bachelor's degree was not even in the subject that she's being kind of retained on. So, and that is exactly why Meryl Gabansky is asking these questions. And I think she's doing a very good job of kind of like building a picture to basically pull apart the credibility of this person as an expert witness. But we are very, very early on, so there may be more later on. That's what I'm hoping. But I'm not overly impressed with the knowledge or experience that this witness appears to have, as just my thought process. But we will also see her being questioned on her report, which obviously we haven't read, but we'll get an idea of what she's going to say in it. So, and we have to remember as well, she was not working alone writing this report and doing, well, I think writing the actual report she was, but doing the work she was not alone. So we will see what comes out of this. And again, if you're going to follow these lawsuits, you have to follow everything and weigh everything. All right, so we are continuing. So, Gurensky asks, what is data analytics? The witness answers, looking at data, and it depends on how big you want to, cleaning, sorting, aggregating data in order to provide an informed decision on what that data tells you. Okay, none of these 3 degrees you list here reflect that you have a degree in data analytics, right? Fritz objects. None of the degrees are called data analytics. Gabensky, Are these 3 entries the extent of the degrees that you possess? Degrees? Yes. Are you familiar with the term computational social sciences? Yes. Computational social sciences also is not mentioned here, is that right? Correct, I don't have a degree in it. What are computational social sciences? I don't know how I would define that. Can you try? I'm not sure. Can you try? Fritz objects. Gawansky, do you know what computational social science means? Fritz objects. The witness, it's an interdisciplinary field. It looks at analyzing large-scale data sets. That's how I would describe it. An interdisciplinary of what disciplines? Computer science, data science, and I'm sure there is another science in there. Those are the 2 that I can think of. Do you have a degree in computer science? I don't have a degree in comp sci. Do you have a degree in data science? I don't have a degree in data science. What about mathematics? Do you have a degree in mathematics? I don't have a degree in mathematics. What about statistics? I do not. What about economics? No. Do you have a degree in digital marketing? The degree is not listed as digital marketing. No. Your CV talks about you being at Meta. You were at Meta for 2 years. 2 years, 6 months. It talks about global head of marketing, business, and product marketing. Were you? That's all of Meta. That's of the business and product. That's of the business and product marketing division. So I was on the side of what most people would refer to as B2B. Can you explain what B2B means other than the literal definition? What is that? Business to business. So Meta has goods and services that they promote to consumers, such as you, Kevin, etc. So people that use Facebook, WhatsApp, a myriad of different solutions. That's what we call the B2B side. B2B is about working with the advertisers, small to medium businesses, things of that nature. And what did you do from a day-to-day perspective as a global head of marketing, business, and product marketing? I ran a couple of teams that include data analytics, engineering, the owned services team. So that is all the things like email, social media, website. And my goal was to, number 1, maintain our website on the business side, ensure that clients or potential customers were able to find what they needed. I also had revenue stream goals, so making sure that we were converting potential customers into active customers. And then a myriad of promotional activities. Yeah, that's the gist. Fritz objects. Why did you leave in 2023? There were changes in the organization, so I decided it was a good time for me to depart. So it was a voluntary departure. Yes, correct. Who did you report to while you were there? I reported to the I reported to the VP. Her role then was VP of, I'm going to say skilled solutions, but I'm not sure if that's the overarching name. You've referenced having direct reports. How many direct reports did you have? Direct reports, I had 15 at the highest. And you mentioned data analytics, but this description doesn't mention data analytics. Why doesn't it include that? I didn't put it in there, but most of my job was around data analytics, data analysis. Why haven't you mentioned that describing this role when it wasn't in your CV? Sorry, why have you mentioned that in describing your role when it wasn't in your CV? Fritz objects. The witness, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Yeah, I'm just saying you volunteered data analytics as part of this position, but it's not mentioned in your CV. I'm just wondering why you mentioned it when it's not listed in your CV. I volunteered it as one of the teams that I oversaw. How did you oversee that team? Objection. It was one of the teams that sat under my purview. So it's actually one of the teams I developed while I was there. Tell me about that. Objection. So in order to lead our owned properties, we specifically had to have insights on how data was captured, how data was cleaned, how we were aggregating data, how we were using data, and then ensuring that it was not only responsible, but also in line with Meta's overall policies. So I had a team of data analysts that did all of that work. How much of that work did you perform yourself? On an ongoing basis for what they did to what I performed? Marginal. Okay. There is a data analytics team separate from one under the marketing department at Meta, isn't there? There are a lot of data analytics teams at Meta. Got it. So when you talk about running a data analytics team, that's a specific team that you created in the marketing department. Yes. What type of specific data was the data analytics team that you supervised performing? We would look at things like social graph, clickstream data. We would look at potential threats across our network. What does potential threats mean? It could mean anything from bots to DDS, someone trying to access our network, to it was predominantly around things like bots, click flow traffic, reporting to see if we were on target to hit revenue goals, usage behavior, things of that nature. Describe your experience with bots while you were at Meta. Part of the work that we did was to look at bot activities specifically across when it came to clients. So specifically, if there were accounts that looked like that bots were used in order to spike traffic, whereas clients had to then pay for said traffic, we would do forensic works around if that traffic was realized, if it was associated with users, or if it was non-organic. Okay, you use the term non-organic. What does non-organic mean? Non-organic means that it doesn't have qualifiers. That would mean that users actually were the ones that generated the traffic. So, when you use the term non-organic, you're referring to automated conduct like the use of bots. It could be bots, or it could be other things as well. What other things? It could be users of coordinated actual users attempting to spike traffic, or to, in a negative or positive way, manipulate the traffic somehow. So users coordinating to spike traffic would be non-organic. That would be non-organic. We wouldn't classify it as that. Internally, we would classify it as we use words like maleficent, but that makes no sense in the real world. So it would be something that would be a coordinated manipulation, pretty much. So you didn't use the term organic while at Meta. We used organic, but not in the sense that we're discussing here. So how are we discussing organic in the sense here? So I believe that when you brought up how we used it, it was in regards to data analytics for around bot traffic. We used organic more from where the origin of traffic came from. So for instance, organic versus paid in an advertising perspective. I see. So you use the term non-organic to describe the use of bots. So how were you using that term? Fritz objects. The witness. Sorry. So non-organic. I'm using it that it is a coordinated sort of manipulation in some way, shape or form, whether through technology or through humans. Gabansky. But that is not how you would use the term when you were at Meta. Every company has their own verbiage. I would use Meta's verbiage internally. Okay, let's look at Meta's verbiage. I'm going to put it into the exhibit. I will share what I will mark as Exhibit 3. Autumn, are you here? Okay. And then someone else comes in, and this must be Autumn. identified as Miss Adams Jack. I'm back. I can handle it. Gabernsky. Okay. You know the one I'm asking for. Adams Jack. Yes. Yes, got it. Gabernsky. As my colleague is putting up Meta's policy, are you familiar with a term called inauthentic behavior? Yes. What does inauthentic behavior mean? It is activity that is not based on the usual way that users interact with content across Meta's platform. What are the usual ways that users interact with content on Meta? The usual ways will be taking a baseline based on data that we have internally. What does that mean? Fritz objects. So within Meta, we have baselines that we can see how users have historically interacted with our content. Based on that, we would form a baseline. So things outside of that baseline would be things that we would check to see why the traffic or whatever the activity was skewed. Okay, so when you used the term earlier non-organic, how, if at all, does that relate to inauthentic behavior? From the way that we use that at Meta, it would be a synonym. What about the way that you use the term organic in your report? To what extent does the way that you use the term organic in your report coincide with inauthentic behavior? I didn't associate the use of inorganic in my report with anything, any verbiage related to Meta, for instance. What did you associate the use of inorganic? What did you associate the use of organic in your report to? In my report, I specifically look at organic behavior being things within the norm that didn't have classifiers of inorganic manipulation. What are classifiers of inorganic manipulation? It could be anything like temporal oddities. It could be user activity that would be outside of a normal time frame. It would be things like amplification ratios, looking at those kind of fingerprints. Let's go down in Exhibit 3 to the first paragraph on the next page. Oh, sorry, let me share. Autumn, can you share your screen on this so we're all looking at the same thing? And then Adams Jack says, I think you have to stop sharing and then I can switch. Fritz says, Nicole, I would just download the document so you can see it, so you can look at it as you see fit. Gabernsky then says, well, I won't share it if that's not helpful. I was doing it more as a helpful. The witness, it's easier for me to look at it on my screen. Gabernsky. Okay, so if you look at the second page, it says, and then Fritz interrupts and says, just take a moment to look at the entire document and then let Meryl know when you're ready. Gabernsky, I'm not going to ask about the entire document though. Fritz, I understand. The witness, okay. Gabernsky. Okay, if you can look at the first paragraph and it says, and then she reads, in line with our commitment to authenticity, we don't allow people to misrepresent themselves on our service, use fake accounts, artificially boost the popularity of content, or engage in behaviors designed to enable other violations under our community standards. Do you see that? Yes. Did you engage in any of these type of behaviors while you were at Meta? Fritz objects. The witness, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? When you were, and then Fritz says, note my objection. When you were doing marketing at Meta, did you engage in any of these type of behaviors? The witness, let me just read this again. So I want to clarify first. So you have me looking at a document for Meta that is about user standards. So this is community-based standards on what consumers or users that sign up on Meta's platforms agree to. So to answer your question, as a user at Meta, someone with a Facebook account, someone with an Instagram account, I did not do any of these activities while at Meta as a user. Question, and why not? Objection, the witness, I don't know how to answer that. Why did you not do something that violated Meta's community standard. What kind of question is that? What is your understanding of artificially boost? What does that mean? So in this context for Meta, as part of their user agreement, it would mean using things like different programs or bots or coordinated activities to increase traffic in some way, shape, or form. And coordinated activities could be manual, right? Not automated. They can be, yes. It would have to be very, very synchronized for it to work at scale, but yes, it is possible. When you say to work at scale, what do you mean? To make a difference. So you, as an individual, clicking on things across the site is not going to make an impact when it comes to traffic. But it's possible that you could synchronate in order to artificially boost without using automated tools, right? Fritz objects. So as I stated before, it's possible, but it's extremely difficult to do. Right. You would have to be an expert in order to do that. Fritz objects. I wouldn't say that. I'm not sure what that means particularly, but you would need to have a vast network of humans in order to pull that off. Okay. And would, under the way that you use the term organic in your report, would that type of artificial boosting that uses a manual network be considered organic or not organic? That would be considered inorganic, the way that I'm using it. Okay, and if we look at the next sentence, it says, and then she reads, inauthentic behavior refers to a variety of complex forms of deception performed by a network of inauthentic assets controlled by the same individual or individuals with the goal of deceiving Meta or a community. Do you see that? Sorry, what page are you on for that one? The same paragraph. Oh, just the next sentence? Oh, yes, sorry. And do you agree with that sentence? I don't disagree with it. It's Meta's terms, but I'm not sure. But do you agree that inauthentic behavior includes complex forms of deception performed by a network of inauthentic assets controlled by the same individual or individuals? Fitz objects. I would say yes, that's accurate. What does that mean to you when it says a network of inauthentic assets controlled by the same individual or individuals? The way that I would, okay. Do you want me to put my Meta hat on, or do you want me to speak from the perspective of an expert outside of Meta? Because there's two different answers. Give me both. So within Meta, that means if you own a link farm, if you are coordinating with bots, particularly to deceive around advertising or politics, those are usually the two forms. Outside of Meta, I would say it's more about I'm orchestrating something that I have access to a myriad of different, most likely computers and algorithmic programs. Because again, as I mentioned, human beings is extremely difficult to coordinate that. And I'm trying to do it in order to impact something in either a negative or positive way. And when it says a network of inauthentic assets, what is your understanding of inauthentic assets? So the way that Meta is looking at this, I'm asking how you are looking at it. Sorry. Fritz. Sorry. Objection. Gavensky, I want to clarify my question. Fritz. Do you want to withdraw it? Are you withdrawing the first one or are you going to ask another one? Gavensky, I specifically asked how do you define the term inauthentic assets? Fritz. Okay. Go ahead, Nicole. The witness. Outside of this context, I would say inauthentic assets would mean any asset that is attempting to either negatively or positively impact something, defraud, or cause harm by specific benefit. And that could be automated or it could be manual, right? As I said before, it's normally automated, and in rare cases, with a lot of coordination at scale, it could also be manual. What is your basis for saying that it's ordinarily automated? So again, in the context of social media, for it to be impactful, make a dent at scale, it is extremely difficult to do that in a coordinated way with a network of humans. How could you do it? Objection. I mean, there is probably several different ways. The one way I could think of would be to rally a massive amount of, again, individuals, human beings in a coordinated attempt that would either cause benefit or cause harm. But there would have to be, it would have to have signatures. I'm trying to think how. It would have to have signatures of authenticity, though, for it not to be identifiable. What does that mean, signatures of authenticity? I'm sorry, I should flip that. I should have said signatures of inauthenticity. Apologies. Can you explain what you mean by signatures of inauthenticity? Signatures of inauthenticity? Uh-huh. So, as I mentioned before, things like, like temporal analysis, content, homogeneous content, it would be things like coordination clusters. But again, that would all be based on actually doing the analysis to figure out if that was there. So if someone was really good at doing this, couldn't it avoid those signs of inauthenticity? Objection. Sorry, I'm not going to say always, but there is usually identifiers, which is why you don't just look at one element of inauthenticity, you look at several different ones. So for instance, posting times, that would just be one. So if someone got around posting times, there is still 6 or 7 other fingerprinting techniques that you can use. So you don't just check one factor, you check a myriad of different factors. But if someone understood what all those factors are, couldn't they devise a campaign at scale to avoid those signs of inauthenticity? Fritz objects. I have not seen that to actually be possible, where it's not identifiable in any of the different ways that you would analyze it. Isn't it possible that you just wouldn't be able to identify it because it was untraceable? Objection. So untraceable sounds good from a marketing perspective. Untraceable is still traceable. So there are usually signatures that fall outside of what the norm would look like or outside of a baseline. And that would then get you to dig deeper into understanding why that happened. If it was authentically an anomaly or if it was a coordinated act. So you say usually, but that doesn't mean that there's always signatures, right? Objection. In all of the ways that I have seen and been privy to, there have been ways of determining inauthentic behavior. How have you seen that? Can you explain? Sure. So I have seen it based on, again, going back to like content, homogeneous content. So things where you have, this is just one example, things where you have identical verbiage, like literally identical, or even things around social media as consistent as the flow of hashtags. So how hashtags actually show up. And I'm seeing that from an original piece of content dropping, not a retweet, not a repost. But I'm trying to ask like specific case studies that you have performed or been involved in where you have seen inauthentic behavior. Oh, objection. So that actually is one. There is one that we saw specifically in my work at Meta. So that's one example. We've also seen actual use case at Meta. We've seen issues where there were like temporal, where coordination across different regions. So they were outside of like normal posting times based on the baseline of when users authentically repost in this case. I've also seen specifically in previous work with Ipsos through Synthesio, which is a social media tool that we had. We've seen things like coordinated signatures around like age activity. So where accounts were like newly created and they were the ones that were posting problematic content. But I'm trying to understand a specific incident, like not just talking generally, but what was the specific content that you saw to be inauthentic? You gave 2 examples at Meta. What were the specific content that you determined that was inauthentic? Objection. So at Meta, in one specific case, it was seeing duplicative, identical content showing up at a higher propensity than normal. What was the specific content? So I cannot tell you the specific content for anything I did within Meta. Are you asking? You can designate it as confidential, but I'm entitled to understand the basis of your knowledge. What was the specific type of content that, in that case, you determined was inauthentic? Fritz. Well, if there's some contract that she's bound by or regulations that said this is proprietary information, then I'm not sure the protective order would cover that. Then the witness, I can tell you that it was political. Gavrensky. And what was your role in sussing out that content? So my role was to look at the vast amount of data over a certain period of time in order to look at anomalies that this content was inflated, or the activity around the content was inflated. How was it inflated? Trying to think of how I can share. There were actors that were pushing this content across Meta's platforms, and we saw bot behavior in that circumstance or in that particular use case. And so that case included bot behavior. Did the other specific Meta case that you were referring to include bot behavior? The other one did. It was different bot behavior. So, I mean, because bot is a very general term, just to be specific, right? Programmatic advertising is bots. So this was manipulative bot behavior in the political case. That was foreign actors. The second case was bot activity specific to inflating advertising numbers in order to harm a business. And have you ever identified in any of your positions any campaigns that did not include bot behavior? Yes. Tell me about those. Objection. So some were with Ipsos. We were looking through Synthesio, which was our social media solution. For when a CPG company felt that sales and the subsequent return of goods was around bot activity, we saw that was not the case. So we were able to identify that it had the signatures of authentic activity where people were just purchasing, were unhappy, and were returning goods. And how did you rule out that it was this type of manual network that did not rely on bots? So we looked at in that case, we looked at tracking. We looked at where the purchases were taking place, where the order was taking place, where the purchases were sent to. And we looked to see if there were any signifiers that skewed outside of what their normal base of customers looked like. So we were able to see that their authentic customers, which they agreed with were authentic customers, had the same signatures as what they thought were inauthentic customers. And if someone wanted to appear to be an authentic customer, that would be possible, wouldn't it? Objection. In this case, it would not have been. What about in any case? Objection. That's a lot of different assumptions I would have to make. I couldn't answer that. Well, what would it take for someone to make a coordinated campaign look authentic? Objection. I don't know all the factors to be able to answer that. Fritz, we've been going for about 2 hours. Why don't we take a break now? Gavrensky, when I'm done with this line of questioning. Fritz, well, no, actually, we're going... Gavrensky, when I'm done with this question, I was in the middle of a question. There was no question. Fritz, you weren't in the middle of a question. Gawensky, I was. Fritz, you weren't. Gawensky, the court reporter, can you read? And then there's some crosstalk. Fritz, we've been going for 2 hours and now you're trying to pose a question. Gawensky, I will take a break after this. My God, this is stark contrast to Ezra Hudson, who needed her 9 minutes. So the court reporter, can you read back the question? There's crosstalk. Fritz, we're going to. Gawensky, Kevin, there's a question pending. Crosstalk. Fritz, there wasn't. Crosstalk. Gawensky, let's ask the court reporter. I'm sure she's asked her like 3 times and then they're not letting her speak. Fritz, frankly, with all due respect to the court reporter, I don't care what this court reporter said. Oh. I suggest that we take a break and then you start to ask another question. Gawensky, that's not true. Fritz, I've never seen anyone do that before. Gawensky, Ash, there's a question pending. If she says no, crosstalk. Oh my God. Fritz, Nicole, we're going to come back at 11:25. You can put yourself and then there's more crosstalk. Gawensky, Kevin, if the court reporter says there's a question pending, we should believe her. If not, then I'll step. Ash, please speak. Crosstalk. Gawensky, please respect Ash. Fritz, I know the sequence. Gawensky, Ash, what was the sequence? Fritz, with all due respect to the court reporter, it doesn't matter. I mean, there was no question pending. Just that's my opinion. Gawensky, Ash, crosstalk. Fritz, you started ask the question which you didn't finish after I asked for a break. It's inappropriate. We're going to take a break now. We'll come back at 1:25. Gawensky, Kevin, I'm allowed to ask. Crosstalk. Fritz, Nicole. Gawensky, stop talking, Kevin. Ash, please, was there a question pending? And then the court reporter, I would have to check. You'd think she would have checked by now, knowing this was coming. Gawensky, please check. The court reporter, here it is. The record was read. And then Gawensky, let's go on break, 10 minutes. She answered that question, right? So basically, the court reporter has confirmed that there was no question pending. She answered that question, right, Ash? The court reporter, I don't know. I'll have to look at the Fritz. What happened after that? And then there's more crosstalk. Fritz, so the record should reflect that there was no question pending. Gawensky, well, I asked the question, but the record was not. And then there was more crosstalk. Fritz, see you in 10 minutes. And then they go off record. Wow, that's wild. I have never seen so much bickering over breaks. This is like giving me Ross Geller vibes. Right. Okay, so they're back on the record. Gabensky. Miss Alexander, we moved on into exhibit share. Actually, I should ask, Miss Alexander, did you have any substantive conversations with your counsel during the break? No. We've moved into exhibit share, what will be marked as exhibit 4. Can you look at that? Yes, I have it. What is it? My book cover. Okay, I'm going to admit as exhibit 4 your book. We're going to send to Veritext a copy of your actual physical book, and then for purposes of the exhibit of the discussion today, I have an excerpt from your book, which I will mark as exhibit 4A, which should also be in your exhibit share. If you can pull that up. Just a sec, I'm downloading it. Sure. 4A, got it. Fritz, are you going to send me a copy of the book too, Meryl? Sure. Thanks. They're all chill now they've had a break. Gabensky, Miss Alexander, do you see the excerpt that is marked as Exhibit 4A? is page 15 of your book? Yes. Okay, and you write. And then she reads, AI-driven content curation on social media platform influences not just purchasing decisions, but also opinions and beliefs. Algorithms prioritize content that is likely to engage users, often amplifying sensational or polarizing material. When you use the terms sensational or polarizing material, what did you mean? I can't think in my mindset at that particular time, but I think I was probably referencing things like specifically, coordinated attempts around politics, around I'm not sure. Just major events where we've seen some harm come to companies, governments, individuals based on coordinated attacks. Okay. And when it says, and then she reads, this can skew perceptions and contribute to the spread of misinformation as seen in various instances where fake news has gone viral. Do you see that? Yes. What did you mean by the term misinformation? So, misinformation specifically, I was talking about where information is presented as either slightly skewed versus what the original information actually is or completely false. Uh-huh. And how has I'm so sorry to cut you off. I should have added for deceptive purposes was the last. Okay, and how is the spread of misinformation related to fake news going viral? So a couple of different ways. So this information is usually meant to feed on emotions. And when you have emotions either to the left or the right, extremely happy or extremely negative, those are the times when human beings usually promote content more. So, from a human perspective, from an algorithmic perspective, we have seen studies that have shown that misinformation also has been able to radicalize individuals, and algorithms show more and more intense information depending on how users engage with that content. So, the engagement that you've just described, that would be organic engagement, right? Misinformation is organic, yes. The escalation of it to get to sensationalism is usually coordinated. I see. So something can be both inorganic and organic. Fritz objects. So I would tease those two out. Something can start off as organic and it can be manipulated into being inorganic. What about vice versa? Can start off inorganic that can be manipulated to seem organic? That's more difficult to do. It's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult to do. How would you do it? Objection. I mean that I'm not quite sure the ways you would go about escalating it. I'm sure there's a myriad of different ways. But as you sit here today, you don't know any ways that would be used to do that other than that it is possible. To go from something that is inorganic to make it, appear organic? No, because no, I can't think of anything. I can't think of how you would go about that. Let's just do in your hypothetical. You said that if something is sensational or polarizing, it can motivate people to go to on their own post, right? Correct. What if the sensational or polarizing material is something that is planted and not truthful? Couldn't that have the same effect you just described? For it to be sensationalized, yes. For then users to pick it up and organically spread it? Yes, that's possible. Let's go back to the excerpt on page 22. It says, and then she reads, reputational harm can be even more devastating than legal penalties. In today's digital landscape, news, especially bad news, travels fast. A single incident can tarnish a brand's impact overnight, and rebuilding trust can take years. Do you see that? I do. Do you stand behind that sentence? Fritz, sorry, you said page 22, Meryl. I thought we were looking at page 15. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to page 22. Is this a new exhibit? Well, I did say 22. Amber, is this the same exhibit? Autumn? Sorry. Oh, let's go to 4B. The stenographer. Meryl, we're going to 4B. We need to announce it. Thank you. Yep, 4B. While my colleague is getting it pulled out. Do you recall writing that reputational harm can be even more devastating than legal penalties, and that a single incident can tarnish a brand's impact overnight, and rebuilding trust can take years? Yes, I know that statement. I remember writing that. Do you agree with that statement? Yes. Okay, and you continued, and then she keeps reading. Recovering from reputational damage requires substantial investment in public relations, marketing, and operational changes. Do you recall writing that as well? I do. Do you agree with that statement? I do. By the way, you talk about brands. When you talk about brands in your book, is that corporate brands? That's any brands. It can be small, medium business, it can be enterprise. Obviously, in regards to the statement that you just mentioned, obviously the amount of investment is vastly different for an enterprise brand versus a small and medium business brand. Right, but the principle is the same. There is always, yes, there is elements of recovery, but brands are also, and I think it's a subsequent statement on either the previous or the following page. I also talk about how brands also have to mitigate their own risk as well. Okay, so other than the book, your CV doesn't list any other publications that you've authored. Have you authored any other publications? Do you mean like academic papers? I'm assuming you mean anything. Objection. I've authored other papers, yes. What papers? I've authored papers at all of my companies, so at Meta. Okay. Objection. Ipsos, Nielsen. Fritz says, go ahead and finish your answer, Miss Alexander. That was it. Gabansky, have any of your other publications that you've authored been published? No. So the book is the only piece of literature that you published? Correct. What sort of journals exist in your discipline? Sorry, in marketing? How would you define your discipline? Fritz objects. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to answer that. How would you define your expertise? We've just got done talking about Meta. If you're asking me in my discipline at Meta, I was in marketing, full staff marketing. So that's everything from data analysis to engineering to, PR, branding, etc. Well, what is your understanding of why you're being offered as an expert in this case? So as an expert in this case, it's for my experience in data analysis, marketing, and specifically social networks. So in data analysis, marketing, or what was the last thing you said? Social networks. Social networks. In your experience in either of those, are there journals that exist in any of those three disciplines? There are several. You want me to just name them? That would be great. Journal of Marketing. God, they all have long names. Nature, Human Behavior, and something. I don't actually subscribe to the journal, so I don't have to. We get them free as faculty. Which ones do you receive as a member of the faculty? I read because receiving and reading are different. I read American Marketing Association and their journal. I read ANA's journal. I'm sorry, it stands for American National Advertisers. I think the acronym it is. Okay. Those are the ones I usually read. So American Marketing Association and the American National Association's journal. Is that right? Of advertisers. American National Association of Advertisers. Yes. Any other journals that you read on a regular basis? Journals themselves, no. I usually read individual articles when they interest me. How do you decide what articles to read? Depending on topic, it could be something that is shared with me, something that is in my queue based on different tags or hashtags. But it's just like an ad hoc basis what you decide to read? Objection. Yes. Have you ever edited any of the journals that you just discussed? I'm not an editor for any journal, no. But none of the work that you've done has been published in any of the specific journals that you've just discussed. No, that's usually for more full-blown academics. Can you explain that distinction? As a practitioner, I don't have the obligation of having to publish, whereas academics usually do. You mentioned that you wrote a number of papers for Meta in the course of your career. Have any of the papers you've written been peer reviewed? None that, well, actually, no, that's not true. Yes, a paper I wrote in conjunction with another author at Ipsos was peer reviewed, and we presented that at jointly at an academic forum. And that was peer reviewed. I think that's it. A peer review process, like in academia, is a little bit different than peer reviewed for a practitioner. When you were referring to a peer reviewed in this context, was it for a practitioner or was it academic? That was academia. Okay, and what was the topic of that paper? We looked at marketing effectiveness and behavior across a global data set. And why did you not list that paper in your CV? Because it wasn't published. Do you have a copy of it? Honestly, I don't know. I may have a copy of it somewhere. What was the methodology that was tested in that paper? So we looked at marketing effectiveness. So we looked at regression analysis of a myriad of different campaigns across different disciplines. In order to talk about things like concepts, how concepts actually worked well if they went live, if they didn't go live, we appended sales data to that for the ones that did go live, obviously. And just looking at the overall trend of how to bring a product concept to fruition. Did you rely on that analysis for purposes of this report? No. Let's go. If you can pull up your report, please. Let's do the latest one, Exhibit 002. Let's go to Appendix C. What is your understanding of what Appendix C is? Those are materials I considered when drafting my report. Did you draft Appendix C? Yes. And I'm going to stop there and move on to part 4.